Alrighty, hello, I'm Ethan Bartlett and welcome to my presentation on the potential discovery of a Phytosaur vertebrae. By the end of today's presentation, I will hopefully have convinced you of the identity of the specimen in question, and I will have hopefully educated you a little bit about the contemporaneous fauna in the Upper Triassic period. First off, there was an undistorted Phytosaur vertebrae discovered in Quay County, New Mexico. The posterior Phytosaur specimen in question is rare, and there's almost nothing written about it, which makes descriptions very difficult to do. With the lack of hard evidence, the identity of the specimen is now called into question. The materials utilized primarily were the fossil itself, location Puerto Canyon, Quay County, New Mexico, stratigraphy San Juan Creek member, Redonda Formation, Dockham Group, Upper Triassic. The specimen is mostly undistorted. There are a few shallow cracks visible on the surface of the fossil. If you look at figure 1 or 2 on your handout, you can see that the neural spine extends backward at a 65-degree angle. If you look at figure 5, you'll notice that at the posterior base, which actually is this image here, there are 3 ridges. One connects the neural spine with the neural arch here. The neural spine's summit is actually missing bone here. And on figure 1 or 2, you can see that the neural spine slopes into a dorsal keel. The pre-zygapophyses connect to the neural spine through thin ridges, as you can see here. Both pre-zygapophyses and post-zygapophyses are separated by a naturally formed triangular-shaped pit, which is visible on figure 5 or 6. The transverse processes extend posterior-laterally at a 55-degree angle, and the transverse processes abruptly terminate 22.16 millimeters away from the centrum itself. On this slide here, you can see that the centrum exhibits a faint hourglass shape. There are 2 ventral keels visible here that enclose a shallow groove. Hopefully you can see that with this shading here. And posteriorly and anteriorly, the condyles concave inward. As well, the transverse processes here fuse with the caudal ribs and no suture is visible. At the base of these transverse processes, lengthy arranged pits can be observed. These are most likely muscle attachment points. Moving on to the discussion, according to Spielman and Lucas, in 2012, there are several contemporaneous fauna specimens available in the San Juan Creek member. Among these are Adasaurs, theropods, Phytosaurs, archosauriforms, as well as crocodilomorphs. The first specimen we're going to cover is, of course, the Adasaur. Now, we do bear a resemblance to the Adasaur. 2 articulated Phytosaur skeletons were discovered in eastern New Mexico in the formation known as Bull Canyon. According to an article by Heckert, the most substantial exposed caudal vertebrae that was visible underneath these dermal armor platings here had a length of 55 millimeters, whereas our specimen has a length of 48.5 millimeters. Now this is very close to the measurement of our specimen. However, this specimen is proximal, whereas our vertebra is undetermined. Despite this, I feel that the evidence is weak to suggest this is an Adasaur specimen. Another specimen that existed in the San Juan Creek member was, of course, the theropod. However, the first thing you'll probably notice is that these specimens are far smaller than Phytosaurs, and once again, there are very little descriptions published on them. Our specimen could theoretically be a large undescribed specimen, but in spite of that, I feel that the results are inconclusive. Our next specimen on display here is, of course, the Metophosaur. And the first thing you'll notice about this Metophosaur is that the vertebrae are, viewing it from a posterior anterior view, you'll notice they seem to have an oval shape. And if you look at this diagram here, juxtaposed with the handout, you can see that the centrum itself is actually far more narrow than our specimen. And the appearance alone should be enough to prove that our specimen is not a Metophosaurus. Van Cleva campi is an archosauromorph found in the San Juan Creek member. According to an article posted in 2008, the articulated skeleton of a Van Cleva campi is far smaller than our specimen, with a sacral vertebrae of the specimen being 35 millimeters. And of course, ours was previously stated to be 48.5 millimeters. However, our specimen is, of course, not a sacral vertebrae. Protosuchus is known to appear from time to time in the San Juan Creek member, and according to Colbert and Mook in 1951, the type specimen they examined was just over 800 millimeters, which is just over 2 feet. According to this article, with these measurements, it is safe to assume that the vertebrae of a Protosuchus is far smaller than our specimen. With these measurements in mind, it is safe to assume that our specimen is, of course, a Phytosaur. The evidence to suggest it's anything other is fairly lacking, and at this time, I feel it is a safe assumption to say that the specimen in question is, of course, Phytosaurian. And the next slide here are my references. Thank you very much for coming to my presentation today, and thank you very much for listening. And that's it.
Okay.